Now, in this lecture, we're going to examine one of the most critical components of digital product design, user interface design. Now, this topic is essential because the UI is the first thing that users see and interact with when they visit a website or use an app. A poorly designed UI can make even the most useful product frustrating, while a well designed UI can lead to a seamless and enjoyable experience. Now, before we begin, let me ask you a question. Have you ever abandoned a website or an app because it was just too difficult to use? Think about a time when a website's navigation was confusing or the text was hard to read. Did you struggle to find the right information? Did it feel overwhelming or cluttered? These are all the examples of poor UI design leading to a frustrating user experience. So today we're going to explore how to differentiate UI from UX, design effective navigation and layouts, and apply typography and color theory to create aesthetically pleasing and functional interfaces. So, one of the most common misconceptions in design is the confusion between UI and UX. Now, while they're closely related, they serve distinct purposes. Okay, so first let's examine UI design. So, what is UI design? So, UI refers to the visual elements of a website or an app, which includes like the buttons, the icons, the typography, the layouts, the color schemes, the spacing. UI is the process of designing user interfaces. UI or user interfaces is the point of interaction. A person has with, say, a digital device, an app, or a website. UI design is strictly a digital practice meant to lead a person visually through a device or an app interface. Now, UI designers work to make user interfaces enjoyable and easy to interact with using different aesthetics. Now, these creatives, they'll work to ensure a person has like a positive and intuitive interaction with a website or an app or a device's interface. A career in UI design is perfect for like an imaginative and empathetic people, with strong communication skills. So basically, think about it like this. UI is all about how a website or an app looks and feels. And then the goal of the UI design is to create a visually appealing and intuitive experience for our users. Now, what is user experience design? Now, UX design, on the other hand, focuses on how people interact with the product and their overall experience. And this is going to include usability, accessibility, user satisfaction, and navigation efficiency. So, user experience design is the process of making products, websites, apps, and services enjoyable and easy to use. Every product that we interact with has a user experience that accompanies it. A UX designer's job is to ensure that the user experience is good. Now, what qualifies as a good user experience is simple. A good user experience will have a mix of desirability, usability, and usefulness. So, a talented UX designer is going to possess traits like, again, empathy and creativity to put themselves in the user's shoes, but also be excellent critical thinkers. Now, what's the difference between UX and UI design? UX is the feel of the product, the app, or the website, where UI is the look of the product, the app, or the website. So UX and UI designers, they work together. Okay, usually on the same team, in the product design process. Often a lot of companies will hire like maybe one person to do like all of the UX and UI work. So it's essential to kind of understand both disciplines. And this is why the terms kind of tend to get confused, or maybe used interchangeably. So, a key analogy of this is if we think about like a restaurant experience, let's think about UI and UX, using this kind of analogy. Imagine you walk into a restaurant. The UI is the menu design, the decor, the lighting, and the table setting. It's the first impression. It's looks nice, but you wonder, does it function well? Okay. The UX is the entire dining experience, the ease of ordering, the friendliness of the staff, the taste of the food, whether you'd return. A restaurant with beautiful decor but slow service and confusing menus provides a poor user experience despite having a great UI. So a website works the same way. A great UI needs to to support a great UX in order to be successful. So, an example of a good versus bad UI UX, if you look at Google's search engine, um, it's simple, it's clean, and it's functional. Users instantly know what to do, as opposed to if you ever took a look at like MySpace, which was from years ago. It was overwhelming, had overwhelming customization. It had inconsistent layouts, and it was really kind of difficult to navigate. So the thing is, or the takeaway is that a good UI is going to enhance the user experience, but a poor UI can really destroy a great user experience. Now, navigation and layout are the backbone of any good UI design. They determine how easily users can find what they need and then move through the website without any kind of frustration. So, why is navigation important? So, imagine if you walked into a grocery store, but none of the aisles were labeled. You'd have to search like every aisle just to find milk. That would be frustrating, right? So, websites are no different. If the users can't find what they need quickly, then they're going to leave. The fact is, there's a study that shows that 38% of users will stop engaging with a website if the layout or the navigation is confusing. So, some of the best practices for navigation design is one, keep it simple. Users shouldn't have to think too hard to find something. Use familiar patterns. Stick to common layouts like top menus, sidebars, breadcrumbs. Be consistent. Menus should look the same on every page. Limit the number of main menu items. Too many choices can really be kind of overwhelming. And then use clear labeling. So you want to avoid like vague terms like more or stuff. You know, you don't want to be specific. And then you want to always follow the 3-click rule. So users should find any page within like 3 clicks. Now, these are some examples of some common navigation patterns. We have top navigation. This is more like the horizontal menus, and this is used in most websites with like fewer pages. Then you have your side navigation over here to the right. These are more like the vertical menus, and these are common for apps and say dashboards. Then here at the bottom, you've got your hamburger menus, and these are used in like mobile design, but not always, they're not always user friendly. And then you have your breadcrumb navigation here, which shows the user's location on the site. So, for instance, the person is, at home, and then within the home section, they're in the services, and then within the services section, they're in the tax advisory. Now, visual hierarchy and white space are two essential principles in UI design that directly impact usability, readability, and user engagement. So imagine walking into a newsstand full of magazines. What catches your eye first? Likely it's the big, bold headlines and images on the covers. The same principle applies to UI design. Certain elements should immediately draw the user's attention. A visual hierarchy is the arrangement of UI elements in a way that guides the user's eyes toward the most important content first. It ensures that users don't get overwhelmed and can quickly find what it is that they need. Now, how is visual hierarchy created? Well, we establish hierarchy using different design techniques, which include size, contrast, spacing and alignment, and color typography. So let's talk about each one of these. So, to achieve visual hierarchy through size, we have to think about bigger means more important. So, larger text is going to grab the attention first. Headlines should be bigger and bolder than, say, body text. And then, call to action buttons or buttons like sign up or buy now, they should be large and highly visible. So, an example of this is like an e commerce website homepage or a product page. The product name is going to be in bigger text, it's going to be the biggest text. Okay. The price, is going to be slightly smaller, but it'll still be, prominent. And then the product description is going to be smaller. So the user sees the most important information first, before deciding to explore further. We can also achieve visual hierarchy through contrast, bold versus subtle elements. So, bold elements, they're going to pop out. Lighter or smaller text is going to recede into the background. So, examples of this are again the call to action buttons. They should be in contrasting colors, like this bright orange, add to cart, or if you've got like a buy now button, on a white background, it should be, some kind of contrasting color to stand out. This is what's going to guide the user's focus to where it needs to be. Another way we can achieve visual hierarchy is through spacing and alignment, clarity and order. So items that are close together are perceived as related. Proper spacing between sections improves scannability. And then when you left align text, it's going to make it easier to read than, say, centered text, in long paragraphs. So an example is a well-designed blog post layout, which places, the a bold, large title, at the top. There may be a smaller subtitle beneath it. Then, of course, the body text is going to be easy to read, font size. And then it would use proper spacing between like the paragraph and the images. Because without hierarchy, everything's going to seem to blend in together and it's going to make it a little harder to read and to scan. And then we can also achieve visual hierarchy through color and typography by directing attention. So, one way we can direct attention is using bright colors because bright colors stand out, while maybe muted colors are going to fade into a background. Another thing that we can do is have consistent font hierarchy because that's going to improve readability. The hierarchy of like headings first, and then subheadings, and then body text. Now, an example of as far as standing out and the colors and directing attention is the example of social media Instagram. The notation button, the red dot, stands out. And so it kind of guides your eye to let you know that there's some kind of notification. So the thing is, if everything looks the same, then nothing's going to stand out. So good visual hierarchy ensures this kind of clarity and focus so that we can focus and something standing out and we can focus on it and it's clear. Now, the F pattern and the Z pattern are both principles of visual hierarchy in UI and UX design, and they're based on how users naturally scan and process information on a screen. It makes them foundational principles for effectively structuring content and designing user interfaces. So, what is the F pattern? So, the F pattern is how users typically scan like text heavy content, such as articles or blogs or search results, or maybe long form web pages. Now, why is it called the F pattern? Well, because the eye tracking studies have shown that users' eyes move across a page in an F shape. First they scan the top of the page in a horizontal line, which forms like the top bar of the F. Next, they move down slightly and scan another horizontal line, forming, say, the next or the second bar of the F. And then finally, they scan the left side of the content vertically, forming the long vertical line of the F. Now, this happens because users don't read everything, they skim. Okay, focusing on more like headlines and subheadlines and bolded keywords. So how do we optimize for the F pattern? Now, since users we know won't read everything, okay, we need to structure our content for easy skimming. So we place important information in the first two paragraphs. We use clear, bold headings to break up the sections. We start paragraphs with key information. Users often skim to like the end of a sentence. And then use bullet points and lists for quick readability. And then we can include eye-catching visuals along the left side to grab attention. Now, what is the Z pattern? So the Z pattern describes how users scan simpler, more visual focused pages, such as like a landing page, advertisement, or sign up pages. So why is it called the Z pattern? Well, because eye tracking studies have showed that users, when they scan the page, they scan in a zigzag motion. So first they scan horizontally across the top, where like the logo and the main menus are. Then next their eyes move diagonally down the center of the page, often towards like whatever the large image or the heading is. And then finally they move horizontally across the bottom, usually landing on like maybe a call to action button like a sign up or learn more. Now, this scanning pattern is common when there's minimal text, and the goal is to guide the user to an action. So, how do we optimize for the Z pattern? Well, since users can scan quickly, design your layout to guide their eyes toward an action. Put key elements at the top left and top right corners, like your logo and your navigation menu. And then use a large visual or headline in the center to capture attention. Then place your call to action in the bottom right area, like your sign up now or whatever the case is. And then use diagonal clues like arrows and images or faces looking toward the call to action. And we want to keep it minimal. Avoid clutter so that the user's eye naturally follows the Z pattern. So an example of this, like a great, say, Z pattern homepage might look like have at the top left have like a company logo, and then at the top right may be the navigation menu. And then in the middle of the page might be like a large attention grabbing image or a headline. And then the bottom right is where a prominent like call to action button would be like, get started or try it for free or something like that. Now, another design principle is the use of white space. Now, white space, it's a powerful, but it's often overlooked as a design element. Okay, so first of all, what is white space? So white space, often known as negative space, is the empty space between the UI elements. Now, it isn't wasted space. It serves as a critical function in improving usability and readability. So, why does white space matter? Well, like I said, it increases readability. Cluttered websites, they can be overwhelming. So spacing between these lines and paragraphs and sections is going to improve being able to understand and comprehension. Also, it creates that balance and that focus. So users they focus better when elements say aren't crammed together. Okay, and of course it gives a cleaner and professional look. And then it also improves clickability. Buttons with room around them, are easier to tap, especially on a mobile device. So some examples of white space in action, if you think about like Google, almost all white space They use almost all white space except for like, the search bar, and this makes the search bar feel kind of central and important. And then if we look at Apple's website, there's large amounts of white space that makes the products kind of stand out, and then there's minimal text. So it makes it easier to scan. A bad example, if you've ever looked at it, is Craigslist, like, the older design. There's no white space. Everything is kind of cluttered, and overwhelming, and it's hard to scan because everything is so tightly packed together. Now, how do we use white space effectively? Well, one is we increase line spacing. We call this leading, okay? Text shouldn't be crammed together. Okay, so you need to have adequate line spacing, between the lines of text. Then you want to give elements room to breathe, adding padding around images and buttons, separate different sections clearly, and then balance content and empty space. Don't overload users with like too much text at once, and then break up large blocks of text with headings and images and bullet points. Now, focusing on typography and UI design is also a good way to improve your website or your app. So, typography is the science of readability. And typography affects, of course, readability, but it also affects branding and user experience. So, some of the best practices for like UI typography is one, use a readable font. We want to use like sans serif fonts like Arial or Roboto. These are going to be better for on screen. Okay. The next thing is to create a font hierarchy. So, headlines should be bold, and larger. Body text should be more comfortable to read. Okay. And then you want to limit your font choices. You want to stick to two to maybe three fonts max for consistency. You don't want to, include like every font that's in the box. Okay. Now, another way we can improve UI design is through color theory. Color evokes emotions and influence behavior. Color increases brand recognition by 80%. So, some common color associations would be like if we think about red, that gives us a feeling of excitement and urgency. We'll see like maybe sales banners, they may use red. Blue gives us a feeling of trust and security. And these are used by like blue is used by like banks or maybe like Facebook uses blue. And then green gives us a feeling of more of nature and health and success. A lot of eco-friendly brands will use green. And then yellow is optimism or energy. McDonald's will use yellow. So the right color or the right choice of color can support better readability of the information. Besides, it can also increase the usability sharply, such as like strengthening call to actions, enhancing navigation, stimulating intuitive interactions, and satisfying aesthetic needs and visual solutions. Now, combining color and UI design is easy, but how do you avoid chaos and overload? Okay, so in order to do this, I want you to remember two principles. The first one is the 631 rule. It's the 60, 30%, 10% principle. It's like the best proportion to reach balance among colors. This criterion works perfectly by cultivating a balance, a neat, harmonious interface that brings pleasure to the users. Also, it can ease users' eyes to move comfortably, from one point to the next. So basically, the 60-30-10 rule or the 631 rule tells us that 60%, has should be like a dominant color. Okay, 30% would be like your secondary color. Those are maybe like more of a contrast element. And then 10% is going to be your accent colors. This is like the color of your buttons and different highlights that you want. Then the second rule is the max three primary colors. So this rule kind of matches the golden three, 631 rule. But it's also a good way to avoid chaos and keeps your color scheme balanced. So the rule of three, or the max three color rule in web design is the principle of color harmony that suggests limiting a website's primary color palette to three main colors to maintain visual balance, consistency, and usability. Now, why use the max of three colors? Well, again, it's going to improve readability. Too many colors, can overwhelm users and make text hard to read. And then it also creates this cohesive brand identity. Consistent color, is going to strengthen like any kind of brand recognition. It also enhances usability and accessibility. So fewer colors are going to ensure better contrast and a user-friendly experience. And then it's going to prevent visual clutter. It keeps the design clean, structured, and easy on the eyes. Now, how does the three color rule work? Typically, the three colors are assigned again specific roles. So, again, going back to the 631, your primary color is going to be that 60%. So that's going to be the dominant color that's going to be used for the backgrounds or for, say, the large sections. Okay, your secondary color, which is that 30%, that's going to be your complementary color for like contrast and emphasis. So, like maybe your headers or your menus. And then that accent color, which is going to be the 10%, that third color, that's going to be your highlight color, for more important elements like buttons and call to actions. So, I want to leave you with a final thought. UI is invisible. Okay, users should never have to think about it. That's your job. Okay, so happy designing.